You made a decision today before your brain even knew it was happening. Maybe it was the route you took to work. Maybe it was the person you decided to trust the moment you met them. Maybe it was the food you ordered, even though you told yourself you were going to eat differently this week. You thought you were in control. You thought that calm, rational voice inside your head was steering the ship. But there is a second brain living inside your body, and it has been making calls without asking for your permission for your entire life. It is called the enteric nervous system, and it runs from your throat to your colon. It contains more than 100 million neurons, more nerve cells than your spinal cord, and it operates almost entirely on its own, not as a backup system, not as a secondary relay, as a fully independent command center running parallel to everything you think of as thought. Scientists used to call it the gut. Now they call it the second brain. And the more they study it, the harder it becomes to say which one is actually in charge. Here is something your nervous system textbook does not prepare you for. About 90% of the signals traveling between your gut and your brain are going upward, not down, up. Your brain sends instructions to your gut, yes, but your gut sends 10 times more information back. It is not a receiving station, it is a broadcaster. Michael Gershon at Columbia University spent decades mapping the enteric nervous system. He was one of the first researchers to argue, seriously and with evidence, that the gut is not just a digestive organ, but a cognitive one. His 1998 book on the second brain is still one of the most cited works in the field. What he found was not just that the gut could function without the brain, it was that it already was. You have felt this before, not as an idea, but as a sensation. The tight knot before a job interview, the hollow drop when you get bad news, the warmth that spreads through your chest when something feels exactly right. You were taught to call these feelings emotional. The truth is they are physiological. Your gut is generating a signal, sending it upward through the vagus nerve, and your conscious mind is receiving it as a feeling, as intuition, as dread, as certainty, without ever being told where it came from. Emeran Maya, a neurogastroenterologist at UCLA, has spent his career studying what he calls the gut-brain axis. His research shows that the microbes inside your gut, the hundreds of trillions of bacteria that have colonized your intestines since the day you were born, are not just digesting food. They are producing neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, GABA, the same chemicals your brain uses to regulate mood, motivation, and fear. About 95% of your body's serotonin is made in your gut. Not your brain, your gut. That means the chemical most associated with happiness, with feeling settled, with emotional regulation, is being synthesized and managed by an organ you only think about when it hurts. Your ancestors knew something about this, though not in the way we frame it now. Every ancient language has a version of gut wisdom. In Latin, viscera referred not just to internal organs, but to the deepest feelings. In Japanese, hara, the belly, is the seat of the true self. In ancient Egyptian cosmology, the heart and the intestines, not the brain, were considered the organs of thought. The brain was so unimportant to the Egyptians that during mummification, they scooped it out through the nose and threw it away. The gut got a dedicated canopic jar. They were not being superstitious. They were being empirical. They were tracking what they actually felt. But here is where it gets stranger. Your gut is not just passively receiving emotional signals from the world and relaying them upward. It is actively shaping the way you perceive experience before you consciously process it. A 2015 study from researchers at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden found that the composition of gut bacteria in mice directly influenced the development of their social behavior and anxiety responses. When germ-free mice raised with no gut bacteria at all, were later colonized with bacteria from anxious mice, they became more anxious. When they were colonized with bacteria from calm mice, their behavior shifted toward calm. The bacteria were not just responding to stress, they were generating a predisposition to it. In human research, the implications become uncomfortable quickly. John Cryan at University College Cork has shown that specific strains of gut bacteria influence brain regions associated with emotional processing, memory formation, and stress response. His team's work found that people with more diverse gut microbiomes tended to score lower on measures of anxiety and depression, not because they were happier people, but because their gut environment was producing a different biochemical reality. Think about what that means. Your emotional baseline, your default level of anxiety, your openness to strangers, your willingness to take risks, may be less a product of your thoughts and more a product of what is living inside your intestines. The food you ate as a child, the antibiotics you were given, the stress your mother was under during pregnancy, the environment you grew up in, all of these reshaped your gut microbiome, which reshapes the chemistry of your moods, which reshapes the decisions that feel like they come from your values and your character. The self you think of as yours was partly built by bacteria you never chose. Now consider a moment when you had a choice to make and you felt it in your stomach before you understood it in your head. A business deal that made you uneasy even though the numbers looked right. A person who made you feel warm before they had said anything you could point to. A direction that felt correct with a certainty that had no logical explanation. You called it instinct, you called it a hunch. You may have second-guessed it because the culture you live in, with its emphasis on data and reasoning and explicit justification, taught you that feelings in your body are less reliable than thoughts in your head. But Meyer's research suggests those gut feelings are not random noise. They are pattern recognition. Your enteric nervous system has been collecting data your entire life. Every social interaction, every dangerous situation, every time something went wrong or right. It has built a model of the world, and when a situation activates that model, it sends you a signal. Not as a verbal report, as a sensation. Your conscious brain can override that signal. You do it all the time. You talk yourself into things your gut was warning you about. You talk yourself out of things your gut was urging you toward. And sometimes that is wisdom, but sometimes it is interference. Here is the piece that should stop you cold. The vagus nerve, the main communication highway between your gut and your brain, does not just carry warnings and hunches. It carries everything: sleep quality, immune response, inflammatory levels in the brain, the speed at which you learn, the depth at which you feel empathy. Vagus nerve stimulation is now being studied as a treatment for depression and epilepsy and PTSD. Not because it is a new drug pathway, but because researchers are finally taking seriously what the anatomy was already telling them, that the body thinks. You are not a brain attached to a body. You are a nervous system that includes a brain. The distinction is not semantic. It changes what health means. It changes what decision-making means. It changes what intuition means. The gut is not mystical, it is biological, but it operates on a timescale and at a resolution that your conscious mind cannot access in real time. It is older than language. It is older than thought in the way you use that word. It developed in your evolutionary ancestors hundreds of millions of years before the prefrontal cortex existed to analyze anything. When you feel something in your stomach, something old is speaking. Something that has been tracking patterns since before your species had words for what it was learning. So tonight, when you sit down to make a decision, when you weigh the pros and cons, when you make the list, when you try to be rational about it, notice what is already happening below your ribs. Notice the quiet signal that was there before you started thinking. You might still choose to ignore it. That is your right. But it is worth knowing that the signal was never random and the source was never nothing. You thought you were in control? The truth is far more interesting than that. You are a collaboration, and you only ever hear from half the team.